Ex-prisoners of Reddit who have served long sentences, what were the last few days like leading up to your release? I did a year in rehab and met a guy who did 25 years in prison for murder. I asked him a lot about what it was like inside and getting out, and what it was like now that he was out. He said he felt scared when he was getting out and kind of sad because of all the people he was leaving. He'd been in that specific prison for over 8 years and knew almost everyone and had some close friendships that he missed. He felt lonely after he left and was actually glad that his halfway house was alive in year-long rehab. It felt familiar to him. He did have a lot of trouble getting work though. I asked my friend this since we are sitting at a diner. He said, "You get excited and depressed at the same time. Excited for the freedom, depressed because you will have a hard time getting a job." He had been sentenced for 18 serving just shy of 13. He's doing well for himself and works on hot water heaters for a living. You should read The Prison Diaries by Jeffrey Archer. It's a real eye-opener. Some of the long-termers get released gradually back into society, but they struggle to deal with basic things, such as using a supermarket they've had so long, where every decision is made for them. Making their own decisions suddenly becomes too much to deal with. Your instincts are to lock bad people up and throw away the key, but for many prisoners this is counterproductive, and they spend the rest of their lives costing the taxpayer instead of contributing to society. The prison system is broken. Paraphrased from an old friend of mine. Excited but also scared and anxious. Partly because he was convinced that somehow they'd reverse his parole, partly because he was terrified he wouldn't be able to readjust. Was also afraid his relationships with his kids wouldn't be able to recover. Overall, until he actually got out, he was more stressed than excited. But the last few hours, when he realized he was actually getting out, he said those were the longest hours of his life. Simultaneously happy but also thinking, okay, they decided I get to go, why the hell can't I leave already? Said it was like taking a plane to go on your dream vacation, but the flight takes forever, there's no movie, and you forgot to bring a book. I did 15 years 9 MTHS. Got paroled, and I didn't want anyone to know. Too many prisoners get flopped by the parole board. I did a 6-month flop, and they get angry at the guys who get paroled. Guys will fight you just to try and get your parole taken, or some will see it at a chance to steal. Hey, he's going home. He don't need that shit, and he sure ain't gonna fight for it. I gave most of my stuff to lifers, long-timers who didn't have family to send them money. So, the last few days were really spent trying to take up the boredom of no way to pass the time. Didn't really work about work, already had a place to live. I'm one of the fortunate ones, just worked at keeping my head down and getting out of the gate. Unit 26 at Parchment Penitentiary in MS is for 2 types of inmates: non-violent drug and alcohol first offenders and long-term inmates on their way out the door. The theory is that those long-term guys need to brush up on their social skills, so they get put in with short-time non-threatening drunks and drug users. My buddy's dad came out of a 22-year bid. Said he misses it in some ways, been a year, and don't think Hess worked more than 2 days in a row. My buddy has to stay with us because of the unpredictability. On top of that, his nephew or something got sentenced to 9 years, and the circle of broken households continue. Yo, you should definitely put a serious tag on this post, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of jokes and unrelated comments on this thread. My husband is in prison and thinking about his transition home is always kind of nerve-wracking. He is going to need so much. A car, a job, clothes, personal items, a phone, etc. So now that he is halfway through his sentence, we have started talking about saving, and he's begun to save money from his paychecks. We also won't be living together right away because we have never lived together outside of prison, and we have to ease into being around each other for more than 9 hours a week. He's really looking forward to getting out, but I see him interact with all of his buddies, and I know leaving them will be hard for him. He is lucky enough to have a job lined up when he gets out, but you can't imagine how hard it would be for someone who doesn't. 15 years on the inside doesn't look so good on a resume. These walls are funny. First you hate them. Then you get used to them. Enough time passes, you depend on them. Red. Nervous of the unknown. Didn't know where I was going to live, what town I was going to parole to after I did treatment. Being able to find a job. Just a fear of the unknown for me. Long days and longer nights. A high level of boredom coupled with an underlying excitement and fear about the future. Self-imposed limits on activities and interactions out of concern that something might happen that would affect your release. 10/10ths would not recommend. Source: served 9 years between 73 and 82. Using a throwaway account, even though this will probably be buried. The last few days are laden with anxiety and fear. Anxiety because you want to be out. You want to be free. You want to be able to walk more than 6 steps in a direction before hitting a wall. Fear because other people know you're getting out and some of them are just there to fuck it up for you. Another person mentioned that people will try to fight you or steal from you because you're not going to retaliate. You can't. You can't jeopardize your freedom. Not when you're this close. I served time for a very ugly crime. The kind you don't come back from. I was afraid for a myriad of reasons. Not the least of which was how will I ever be able to reintegrate into society. On top of that, you have to wonder if any of your friends will even associate with you again. Mine don't. I also haven't been able to get a job. I've been out for 18 months, except for the one time I got a job at a gas station for 2 days before they completed their background check and decided that they wouldn't let me continue. I'm not going to reoffend because I refuse to go back, but I genuinely can't see a way forward. At least while I was locked up I knew what I was going to do tomorrow, I knew how I was going to get money, I knew what was in store for me. Out here I'm a leech. I hate it. So what were my last few days like? They were filled with a simultaneous excitement at having freedom and a deep fear of being free and not having rigid structure. You should watch a Terperson show on YouTube, it will answer all your questions and even way more. Rectify is an underrated TV show about this topic. I did over a year for burglary in TDCJ just over 12 years ago. When I was being released, it all felt like the entire 13 months was a dream. The week prior, I basically started taking risks that I wouldn't have otherwise. TDCJ has no possibility of parole, it's day for day, but the limit is I believe 7 years. The disciple ranged from commissary revoked and no recreation to isolation and then transferred to Atascocita State Jail, where they had a big caged dorm that reminded me of the pterodactyl habitat in the third Jurassic Park movie. Anyways, the week prior I started basically manufacturing things for my cellmates that I wouldn't have risked otherwise. I was affiliated while I was doing my time, so I had access to certain things like bleach, tobacco, extra food items, basic shit. Risky activities were as followed. Create tattoo ink. Convince a crackhead to smoke soap. Make individual hooch containers for everyone interested. Destroy prison-issued materials for modification clothing. Transport traded goods between cells. I can go into detail if anyone's interested, and I have quite a few stories. But basically the entire ordeal felt like a dream, and all I can think about was observing how much I changed compared to the peers I had before incarceration. The first 70% of my stint had me doing more affiliated related activities and more generic dumb prison stuff. Heart checks, intimidation tactics, stupid shit that angry youth with shoulders riddled with chips would do. At one point between month 9 to 10 I decided to go to an AA meeting out of sheer desperation of leaving my dorm, which was common among inmates. While at this particular session, one inmate from low risk vented about an opinion he had, and his words struck with me. All you ever hear about in prison, well the common prisons, maybe not max security and the like, is what people are going to get when they get out and all the shit they had before they were inside. Very few people actually commit themselves to self-rehabilitation in any capacity. Nobody tries to come to grips with the issues that landed them there in the first place. It was always "Ima get this car in Maine, I'm gonna drop a rack on, insert drug slang and other stupid, non-productive shit." His rant was more motivational and articulate than I'm putting it, but the subject is the same. From that point on, I spent my time exercising and reading. To make money I would manufacture various goods and file remedial legal motions for time served on various misdemeanors for other inmates. I learned all of my crafts from older repeat offenders, and I'm thankful for the valuable lesson shutting the fuck up and listening for once. I'd like to say my experiences in prison is what helped me earn my skill in electronics repair. I have a knack for finding unorthodox ways to achieve things. Making the most out of what you have and helping the people around you to the best of your ability. During the last few hours, all I could think about was how I felt like I just went through a really shitty version of Goku's hyperbolic time chamber. I had the privilege of a family that propped me up in the first couple months of release. I had no idea what I was going to do for money. I had no skills, and the trade courses in the prisons were a joke. It was only a means to get your hands on hard-to-find items and meet up with people not in your immediate dorm. I did 5 years. By that time I made it to a minimum security prison. That means a jail with no walls and no locks. You could easily escape if you wanted, but you would just be an idiot too. The days dragged on slow. I couldn't sleep for the last few weeks. I was anxious and nervous. I had plans to have all types of sex and eat all types of food, but none of my plans panned out the way I imagined they would. I did 11 months, was a year but got out a little early. A lot of guys told me there was a lot of anxiety, and the weirdest thing was being able to wake up, leave their house and go to bed at whatever time. Being so dependent on the government for so long and then just being released all of a sudden to take care of your own was a lot even for a lot of adults. Most of them being introduced to probation parole, so there are added hoops to your life as far as getting a job and doing everyday things. When I was released I had a lot of things lined up for me like going back to school and had a good place to live, so when I got out I was ready to be out. The days leading up were very long days just watching the clock knowing you're finally going to be out in the real world. I was really nervous knowing I could have not gotten out on that day, but lucky for me I was and have got back into school since. I did 2 years, 6 months, 19 days for a violent crime I committed as a dumbest 21 years old. In the months leading up, I was basically walking on eggshells trying my best to make sure I didn't get into any fights, or any sort of trouble for that matter, that would get me put into solitary and could extend my time. The night of I was just giving all my belongings away to friends. Extra sneakers and clothes, soap and shampoo, polos for visits, cassette tapes, cooking utensils, food, books, etc. Everyone was grateful but definitely an odd experience to go through. Some of the younger dudes fucked with me a little and roughed me up, more like in a friendly wrestling way and not actually fighting, but there was some added aggression in there as I could tell they were pretty jealous. I also made my last phone call from the in-house phone booth to make sure my ride was going to be ready the next day. That morning I woke up and was just like, wait, this is really happening? Gave away any last-minute shit and said my goodbyes, traded a few addresses, and then was led down to the transport building for final preparations. After changing into street clothes, I sat there from 7:30 to 10:45, all the while with the guards telling me nobody was there to pick me up. I damn well knew my mom was there, and I had to wait until they showed up. Finally they said my ride came, put me in the van and took me to the main admin building where I literally just walked up and through the front doors. I remember looking around like, really, I'm just allowed to walk right out? I'd how to explain it, just a crazy thought to process after being locked up for those 2.5 years and being ordered to do everything, and then suddenly, just go ahead, walk right out. Got out, walked right up to my mom's car, she had been there waiting since 7 a.m. Fuck you Coz for that last bullshit ploy, gave her one of the more emotional hugs of my life, and then got in the car, and she drove me the fuck out of there. This October will be 8 years since my release. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it in some way. I look forward to the day when our society changes the prison system to one focused on rehabilitation instead of punishment. As someone who grew up elsewhere, I see two major issues. Profit motive by prison industrial complex and the general sentiment of many Americans who view convicted felons as subhuman. Unfortunately, I don't see either issue going away anytime soon. I did 14 months in a county jail. The days were long. I played a lot of cards, chess, and I made everyone laugh, including the Coz. Honestly, jail saved my life. The days leading to processing out was weird to say the least. I hadn't seen the sun in so long. The weirdest thing was using silverware. I went to eat at a Denny's that morning, and my eggs tasted like metal. I didn't know what the fuck, and then it dawned on me. I've only been using plastic utensils.